since we are speaking about infrastructure procurement, I'd like to know how does corruption happen in that space, because we always hear about corruption. How does corruption really happen in the infrastructure space, not just in procurement, but in infrastructure space in general?
Okay, so you want to know how corruption relates to the infrastructure?
No. Typically, how does corruption happen in that space? How is money being stolen if corruption is the stealing of money? Yes, because once we know how it happens, then we will know how to what type of interventions we need to make.
Okay, Ronnie, the stage is yours.
Okay, no, thank you for that question. I do think it's a very important question, given the state of the construction sector as things stand at the moment. And look, first of all, corruption is a very broad word as it stands, and there are a number of forms and different types of corruption that happen. There's fraud, there's money laundering, there's all sorts that's there. In as far as infrastructure procurement is concerned, there are a number of ways in which that could happen. That could happen on either the client side, or it could happen on either the parties that are invited to tender for that particular work. So in this country, we are very much lucky because we have there's a constitutional imperative around procurement in general. So Section 217 of the Constitution gives us, I think, 5 key terms or principles that need to surround procurement. And this is not infrastructure procurement as it stands, it's just generally procurement in as far as government is concerned. I will go back to private sector and what are some of the ways in which in that space corruption happens. So to start first in the government space. In the government space, there's a number of ways in which it could happen. National government, provincial government, municipalities, SOEs. It depends on the integrity, first of all, of the processes that these individuals have. So infrastructure procurement, first of all, is governed by the prescripts of the CIDB, as you might know, from the standard for uniformity in infrastructure or construction procurement to the code of conduct that the CIDB endorses for the parties that are involved in procurement in the government space. And there's obviously the SCM policies from an SCM point of view and the sorts. So from a client point of view, to say for example, we're dealing with public works. So from a public works point of view, the nature of how corruption happens is actually determined by the procurement choices we actually make. If you decide that you are going to do design on your side, and then you take all the stuff to the market so that they price the full, they give you a full price of how much they would do the work for, that then creates a unique situation to deal with corruption in that space. But if, say, for example, you choose a different procurement route, let's say, for example, you choose design build, you appoint a design build contractor who will be responsible for design and also the contracting part of it. Or let's say, for example, you choose a much more sophisticated form of procurement. It raises different types of situations in which procurement could happen. So in South Africa, the reality of the matter is that the way corruption generally happens, it happens within the traditional space of contracting. The traditional space of contracting is the traditional design field, where the employer is involved or responsible for the design aspect of the work, and then they go to the market to get the work priced by the industry. So they work with a number of consultants in as far as that is concerned. So you'd have your civil engineers and everyone else trying to work for the client, giving them design information, and then getting that information to a point whereby the QS will obviously try and deal with the quantities and so forth, and then get that to the market. And when you get it to the market, you already have all these individuals that have been involved before, and by the time it goes to the market, there's already a number of people who have been involved in the procurement process. So one way in which then, I'm going back to your question now, because I think it was very important that we set the context so that we don't really just say in a simplistic manner, because I do think that procurement, infrastructure procurement, is much more different and much more unique compared to let's say infrastructure, let's say procurement for goods or other forms of services. The complexity of infrastructure requires, in fact, at the very least, that we have the kinds of processes that are in place where you are able to, at the very least, get a number of professionals involved in the place, but particularly because not everyone knows everything. So therefore, you need to create these forms of specialization to ensure that everyone is able to contribute in where they have capacity to contribute. So going back to your question, it could happen in one way. One way is that the guys on the client side could sabotage the integrity of the process because the framework has already been put in place. The expectations are already there to say that once you do or once you engage in procurement, this is what's expected of you. But if you then decide, for whatever reason that may be, or in fact, I do think more often than not, procurement is really just more selfish related sort of approach to things, and also has to do with elements of power of where you work and however they decide to, say for example, require that you do certain things for them. So on the procurement side, two things. It happens from an information point of view. There's certain types of information. If we take this as a traditional procurement environment where design and construction is separated, the way that I've explained it earlier. So one is the information. If you leak information on however whoever is supposed to price for that and so forth, then you are compromising the entire process, and that amounts to some form of corruption. It could be defined as however you, there's a lot of times to define the forms of corruptions that are there, but it is some form of corruption because you are leaking information that the other parties are not supposed to be privy to. Second part is, I'm still on the client side. On the client side, if say for example, the parties that are in, this is not an information one, but this is a sort of a power related one, where you as a registered professional, let's say you are registered with the SACP-CMP and your boss comes to you and they say that, okay, I have a couple of my people that must be appointed in this contract, and these individuals need to then get this contract, and when they get this contract, it's going to work for me. Just make sure that as a professional, for example, you, Gundo, registered, let's say you are registered with SACP-CMP, you are then required to make a determination on the contract. The moment your boss tells you, as a professional, registered professional, that you need to take this particular decision without you applying the 10 years of experience or 5 years of university life you've been doing, that amounts to some form of corruption, partly because you are expected to start with things that you actually need to be independent and apply your judgment in how you determine things. That's on the client side. From the contracting side, so these are the guys that then respond to the bids. Contractors can collude in so many ways, particularly the larger contractors, where the market is actually not as saturated as the smaller contracting side. The larger guys, they know each other.
Ronnie, you froze there.
If they know to say, okay, look, we're bidding for this work. I froze now.
Yeah, but yeah, you back now. Yeah, you back.
Okay, sorry. Okay. All right. So the larger contractors they are more prone to colluding, particularly on the larger contracts, primarily because the market is not as big. The CIDB register, for example, there's only 50-something thousand registered contractors of the CIDB. 12,000 contractors are actually registered between grade 2 up until grade 9. 12,000 contractors, and that's grade 2 between grade 9. The other rest are actually in grade 1, and they are not really important. It's just people who are trying to chance and try to get in the market. As you go up, the number of contractors become fewer. So grade 9 to go down, you probably, last time I checked, I'm not sure if this is still precise, but for now, I'll just make an assumption to say that I'll just use the previous sort of knowledge I had around grade 9 contractors. I'll just say maybe there's 200 registered contractors in grade 9, different categories, of course, not GB, CE, and the sort. I'll just say 200 contractors. And let's say you get a contract that says the CE contract, it's in Gauteng, and in Gauteng, let's say it's Rand Water, and that contract, you probably know the guys that are going to, the larger guys that are registered for it, there's only 200 of them, and even fewer will actually be bidding for that work. So cover price, there's then a concept called cover pricing that comes in, where everyone will be able to sort of sit down and predetermine the price that they think this work should be going for, and everyone prices in a manner in which will actually help one guy win the contract. And once they win the contract, the other guys come in as subcontractors for some components of work. So that's partly the kind of corruption that happened in 2010 when we had the scandal that came with the World Cup stadiums and the sorts. And in as far as I just want to close in, and then maybe we'll have further engagement much later. Just for now, I just want to highlight at the very least the intricacy of how corruption happened in the construction sector. There's individuals, there's institutions, there's then the processes and policies that underlie how this all works. So you cannot look at corruption from a narrow point of view to say that it happens only this side or it happens only this side. It's actually in my view, it's actually a much more complicated phenomenon that happens through the interaction of different entities, individuals, and also the processes that these individuals should work. And I will explain later why I think my solution to most procurement problems that South Africa has is actually transparency. I do genuinely think that transparency in infrastructure procurement can solve so many of the issues, but I will then explain that much later, obviously in more depth, try and give my own views on how perhaps we could deal with the scourge of corruption in the industry. But for now, I'll just keep it there. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Thanks, Ronnie. In fact, that solution, I think you are preempting another question from Gundo, which you can tell us more on that. Sibani, you've heard. I think Ronnie has spoke about this comprehensively. I hope there is still some stuff left for you to from your point of view. What leads to corruption in the infrastructure industry?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mthethwa. Good evening to my esteemed colleagues. Thank you very much for the platform and opportunity once again. I think Ronnie has definitely pretty much said it all as it relates to corruption and how it happens with regards to infrastructure procurement. I think the main things I was going to say was the collusion. I'll just hammer into the examples of how it could happen, because I think Ronnie has already set the context in which most of these things take place. So I think collusion, I think that has been a popular one, or a most notable one in the recent years, where big companies were involved in the collusion, setting prices for prospective bids. Obviously, with regards to Section 217 of the Constitution, which sets out that public procurement must be fair, equitable, competitive, cost-effective, that already takes away the competitive nature of procurement when we are going to sit around the table and set up a predetermined price in order for us to say, look, this is how much money we can make, and if we do it this way. So obviously that circumvents the competitive part of it. One of the other things I think that could cause corruption to take place is bribing. If I come to Mr. Mthethwa and say, look, I have R1 million, I want this project. So maybe Mr. Mthethwa then says, okay, fine. Since Sibani is a competitor, I'll just simply take away one of his returnable documents from his tender pack. And obviously, Sibani will now be disqualified from the tender, you know. One of the other things is that I think that sometimes I would imagine, or this is my assumption, that sometimes it happens that a tender will come out and it will be suited to a particular contractor, where everyone else with the same grading and with the same capabilities will be just thrown away by one particular requirement that the person who set, or the people that have set this thing in motion, know that only one person can meet this criteria. And so sometimes that has happened in the past, where tenders will be like that and they'll be suited to one person. So that can also happen. I've already mentioned the administrative part of it, which is addressed by PAJA, the administrative part of it, where a person will take out an unreturnable document from your pack and deem you non-responsive to the tender. And obviously, there are many other things, kickbacks, leaking of information, all sorts of things. I think all these issues then lead to the existence of corruption within the public procurement. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Gundo, I hope that was satisfactory. It's laid a ground to your next questions.
Yeah, indeed. I'm happy with the detail and the way the question has been approached. The level of insight shows that it's either they were paying attention or they were participating.